we got ourselves the KSL Finals. Best of 5 between top right Byun, bottom left Classic. Music. It's helpful. So, both these players going to EWC. Both these players not been too shy about actually performing still in the Open Cups and revealing all their playstyles and whatnot. But it's also not that surprising. That's kind of the place that we've come at of StarCraft 2. Only a couple of players seem to really make it a note to not play publicly prior to a big tournament. For some people, I'm sure that there's just generally thinking that probably be a good idea. Some people might actually be keeping actual secret builds. They're gonna, perform once against that one nemesis that they have, and they don't want to be revealed. Unless your practice partner reveals it, like apparently Oliveira did a little bit. Revealed a little bit of Cyril's plans. But anyway, other than that, especially if you are already someone who's very varied, I guess, or the matchup already has kind of like a dictated pace, I suppose, then there are definitely things that you can read into, but there are also things that might not actually be as set as you expect. So if Byun always SEV scouts, he might actually change that up pretty easily if he wants to, or if someone is like, hey, don't do that anymore, for whatever reason, right? Obviously less likely for a Terran to SEV scout, which is kind of why I brought it up. And for the Protoss, there's actually a little bit of that. Some of the times it seems like they always go probe scout, and then there's actually some times where they don't, and it seems like it's a loss of kind of free damage and a lot of free scouting, but some Protoss players do it. So in conclusion, these guys don't seem to care, but they are absolutely caring about the results at EWC. They just don't care about actually playing versus each other and then showing off any of their particular TvP. I mean, for Byun, he actually is basically playing nothing but Terrans anyway, so that doesn't matter as much. But then for Classic, you think maybe he would want to hide some of his CVT. PVT, there we go. Zerg did just resub in chat. Thank you, Rootcats, for that 4 months. He's PVT because he is playing Clem, actually, as his first round opponent. And his bracket is also, I think, a little more diversified as far as the races in general. But, yeah, first it's Clem, kind of his big problem, and then maybe if you really are optimistic about your chances, maybe you'd also start worrying about Cyril, for instance. He's on the Group B with Cyril. Yeah, first and foremost, Clem, and when it comes to getting practice versus someone like Clem, I would say that Byun isn't a terrible replication, isn't a terrible... is not terribly different. I think they are different, and I think there are times where Clem is better, and I think there's times where Byun is better. Maybe right now Clem is better, but I think as far as the kind of highlights of their game style, you are talking about micro, so that's obviously going to be one big thing, and multitasking, but as far as the openers, the build openers, Byun might actually have a few more that he throws out than Clem. Not that Clem isn't diverse in the matchup, just that it seems like Byun leans a little more to that, like he's friends with Yuliho and takes a couple of his ideas every now and again. Or just has great ones of his own. I want to give him all the credit for being the innovator of the Terran race. A couple of Cyclones pop out and already dissuade Classic's Adepts from doing anything further. It's actually going to be 4 Cyclones off of the factory expand into a second Rax. Perhaps, into just a 2-1-1, actually. So Classic's going to be denied vision from anything further, but 2 Cyclones to start things off. He knows that they will be trying to harass. He is getting a shield battery, but it is not done, and a little far back away from, well, I was going to say that pylon. Obviously, you can charge the pylon if it needed to, but the Cyclones did not see an open opportunity. They're going to wait for their buddies, and 4 Cyclones... actually kind of an opportunity, perhaps. I can see the Adept or Stalker going down for sure. This is a heavy commitment of resources, though. Far more than you would expect from this. If you're thinking Reactored Factory often produces Widow Mines or Hellions, the Cyclones are straight up more expensive. So do keep that in mind. But the Adept already getting bopped, left completely alone, as Classic had no idea what the follow-up was to the factory expand. He also had to worry about potential drops into the main, so that's why he moved his units a little bit. And that's all it took, really, for the Adept to go down, and now for things to be a little bit troublesome. Shield Battery Overcharge having to be used. Good save from Byun on his 1 Cyclone. Shield Battery Overcharge plus the promise of future gateway reinforcements kind of means these Cyclones have a limited amount of time, but what they might have been able to do is scout just how dedicated 2-base Classic was. Unfortunately, on this map, that is more difficult. If it was at the 3rd triangle third, then the Cyclones could have waved on by and been like, oh, okay, gotcha, understood. And in this case, they would have had to have dived, which would have been extremely dangerous. So I'm not sure Byun is actually aware. As far as the warp-ins, you know, they were still only kind of 1 or 2 apiece. In fact, I think they're just 1 apiece. Classic actually having 4 in total, but still expanding. So yeah, it's a 4-gate, but as far as the, oh god, the potential of winning, I think it might be a little lower. And this is actually really weird. That aggressive blink to catch the Cyclones has really turned around on Classic. Oh my good lord, that was a disaster. Holy shit, that was so bad. Wow, okay. That, Well, I was trying to say that Classic might not to do, you know, not need to do as much with that third base coming down. Pretty lickety split. You know, we've seen Max Packs do, well, he 3-gates a lot more than 4-gates nowadays, but still, where he'll make that decision. He'll say, like, this isn't worth to go for the dedicated attack, and then his harassment is pretty top tier, so he still finds some amount of damage even when he kind of admits that it won't really work. Classic, first of all, just simply not as good, actually. Max Packs is basically the best at that. But then also just gave away so much of the pressure that you might have felt if you knew that the Stalker Ball was alive and healthy waiting outside your front door. But losing 7 Stalkers for that, that's frankly less than ideal. Finally, some harassment going on. 5 SCVs have gone down. You know, Byun, he did not end up getting the 2 medevacs dropping in as a surprise, but he will get 1 medevac across the map. And there are some pretty juicy pylons that I'm looking at. It looks like this gateway actually... Nope, there's an observer. There's an observer that clearly just told him to go ahead and recall, but this will end. It does actually trade rather well. The Warp Prism and that last Stalker goes down. Oh my god, that was like 4 Stalkers and a Warp Prism. 3 Stalkers and a Warp Prism? Either way, that's bad. Wow, Classic not having the best game of his career. Still looking okay-ish in the supply, but when you do consider what a Protoss needs, I don't know if he's actually gotten it fast enough. Charge will finish. That's one thing that he needs. Blink has obviously been done for a while, but we have no blink pressure stopping these tanks, forcing them to siege or unsiege. The rocks aren't yet broken down. That's another thing that Classic will need to ensure that he gets a good concave ore surround. And I just don't know if he actually had enough economy. You know, because he's relying purely on gateway units to actually be able to afford this many. It's a trick. You know, wow, Byun even pulled the SCVs here. No 3rd CC, just going for the attack. No 4th or 5th barracks either. Kind of just a style, like a decision made, rather than a build order from the get-go. And SCV pools can be extremely strong against someone who's relying on 0 area of effect to defend. And there's a lot of shots wasted on these SCVs. This has bought at least some amount of time. Charge lots have been warped in, coming from a couple of different angles, at least trying to. I mean, it wasn't the most effective surround, but it is going to be enough. Classic gathering the Zealots in good enough numbers to push back not just the bio, but also the SEV pool, which I actually thought that would be way closer. But Byun not able to hit that timing before those gateways really started to activate, before Classic got to that critical mass of Zealots. And now Byun is just kind of doing this to say that he does it. Not sure he actually believes in his ability to win here. He just likes to micro. Okay, maybe not, actually. Maybe he could win. In fact, these Zealots are not the best units when they're being out-microed all damn day long. And that poor Immortal was also focus fired down. That's something that maybe Classic was thinking would happen. Disruptor also isn't as useful as it might seem. If there is a direct attempt to kill the Protoss army, then maybe, yeah, the Disruptor hits perfectly. But if Byun could start trying to do a little more of the hippity-hoppity into the main base, that Disruptor might struggle to catch up. Same for the charge lots, honestly, which are once again just mostly charging into their death. This time around, supported by Stalkers. Good blink forward, focus fire on the Marauder. Definitely going to be pushed away by that tank. It's not quite over. You know, you can see why Byun did put in the little extra effort there to micro, even when it looked like all was lost. But as cool as that was, overall, he's in a terrible position. He did sacrifice a bunch of SCVs to do this attack. He never got a 3rd CC. Can't even afford 4th and 5th barracks production. Barely affording that +1 armor, as he thinks that he might have a 2nd power spike. Which maybe he does. Still almost even on the army supply. Liberator's going to try and go for a big distraction in the main base. Stalkers, however, are waiting. They actually get pulled to the front I don't believe they saw the Liberators. They might have, but this observer is tracking the army, and the Stalkers are wondering if they're going to need to get on the front lines. Ooh, that Disruptor already injuring the tank, catching some units. Army supplies. Not good enough by my estimate. No, it's not. No, this is pretty one-sided, actually. Still amazed that Classic was able to muster up that good of a defense, though. Just thought that the SCV pool looked a little more intimidating. So he, like, lost a bunch of Stalkers without trading too well. He did delay, I guess, the actual 2 medevac push. God, that just seemed like such a disaster. Twice the resources lost. Then it's not good in the main base either. Does get a couple of SCV kills. I mean, his third base isn't even that saturated. This is what I was talking about. I felt like this period of time, you know, you'd prefer to have your 8 probe lead by now. He only just now gets to it, but for the past minute and a half, he's been at equal workers. Sees the move out. Doesn't actually see the SCV pull. He does actually see it. Already had a second shield battery. But you check out the army right now. You know, if Byun really just punches it, like doesn't even wait for the tanks to siege, I do wonder. Yeah, maybe not. The Zealots, at the very least, are great at buying time, aren't they? So even if you tried to punch it, the Zealots would take a little while to actually tear down, with the shield battery supporting them as well. The extra 30 seconds given here was 7 Zealots up to 15. Good force fields, too. A lot of SCVs get cut off, and the tanks aren't actually shooting across the force field. Yeah, I feel like the execution of the attack actually could have been better. Maybe it is a good idea, but... So, despite a great start to Game 1, Byun ends up behind, going into Golden Aura. On the top left, we do have Classic. They seem to really have a very odd start, but... Yeah, you know, I would say that while the Stalkers definitely didn't look great, we might even have to continue analyzing that 4 Cyclone opener. That is a heavy investment. And while his second barracks came down fairly quickly, you know, he didn't go for a 1-1-1, he went for 1-1-2-1. Like, it still impacted the number of actual fighting units once those Cyclones are gone. And then even if they didn't die in that trade with the Stalkers, it's really arguable how good 4 Cyclones are with that push. Would have much rather had, like, you know, 4 additional Marauders, for instance, if that was possible, or 8 other Marines, if that was possible. It still seemed like such a good idea. I'm with Byun, you know, like, SCV pool against someone who just lost the Stalkers to get that buying time just out of the way. War Prism's not bothering you. Full focus on the attack. SCV pool into someone with only Zealots. Like, sounds like a great thing, but Classic did well defending. Good use of the force fields. Great preemptive surround making with those Zealots. Even though it was tipped off, it's still, you know, there's nothing that Byun could really do about it. It was good. I'm getting used to, fast forwarding because I was just with Lambo learning about some Zerg, but whoops-a-daisy, back to normal speed. So we do have another factory expand. This time around, though, definitely not Cyclones. 3 Reapers and 2 Hellions. We're going to be trying to charge in to the natural to perhaps overwhelm, depending on what is there, honestly, but then also you jump into the main base if it can. Classic, not making any mistake about being overly aggressive here. He saw there was a factory expand and decided that it was just simply not worth it to send any adepts out for any additional scouting. And he's going to be thankful for that because I do think he needs it back at home. Reapers do just go into the main base. They're going to distract all 3 of the units that Classic has currently. Hellions could go into that natural, deal at least a little bit of damage. Yes, there's a shield battery, but eventually they will tear down a couple of probes. Already 2 of them going down to the Reapers. Good scout as well, and 2 Reapers will be able to escape thanks to the grenades. The Hellions are so close to actually killing one of these probes. There we go, but they do, at the end of the day, only get 1 probe. That shield battery in the natural, a real lifesaver, honestly. And I say because maybe there's a chance Classic would have pulled to the main no matter what. But actually, I'm guessing the reason he did confidently send all of his units, his very limited number of units to the main base, is that he knew a shield battery would cover his butt for at least a little bit of time. But yeah, if he had not had a shield battery and made the mistake of moving all of his units... I mean, how did he didn't move all his units? Like, this is, like, multiple units versus not very many units. It's just going to be difficult to have all the in the right place, and you might kind of have to accept a couple of probe losses, but hopefully not much more than that. In this case, it was 4 probes, but all the units died. So I would not say that's actually all that great. Byun with another bunker here. Has not yet seen the 3rd base, but he did get all up in that main and saw that there was not any type of urgency to get to the gateways. By the way, this is Wicket. She's growling at Dimitri because he's sleeping and she's weird. Okay, bye-bye, Wicket. She's been running around. It's my foster cat. She's 8 months, so a little kittenish. Anyway, so we got nice defenses set up here for Byun, who is waiting for his actual army. So it goes. Classic, with only 3 gases so far. 3rd base is finishing up here. Charge is the choice. Gonna go for some mass gateway stuff again. I mean, you know, it's actually kind of weird. I feel like I'm a little out of my element just because so many of the PVTs I've been seeing over the past couple of weeks have actually been a lot of the same thing. Like, there's been a lot of blink into just Colossus, or Stargate into Colossus. I mean, basically just into Colossus, you know? But Classic, I mean, last game he could have gone into Colossus eventually. It was an undetermined factor because the game ended before then, but he did emphasize those charge lots first, so that still isn't what I've been seeing. 2 Banshees? What the hell? When did those get made? I am completely blind. My goodness. It's when I was holding my cat up, obviously. 2 Banshees were made. And actually end up being a surprise to Classic as well as to me. It's obviously more impactful for Classic, though, who is struggling. There we go. Good thing that Observer didn't move, actually. Got that last shot. But 8 probes go down because it ended up being a surprise. And 8 probes for a single Banshee kill is totally fine, I think, for the Terran. The second Banshee would like to get a couple of more probes, and then maybe it's okay if both Banshees die. But with both Banshees made with Cloak, that is an investment. They needed to do something, and I think they've done enough. This one Banshee still at least being a bother. Now, Classic does have vision on Byun's side of the map, so he would know if he's about to be pushed. That's not the issue. He can now focus entirely on dealing with the Banshees. But it does mean that even if he sees the push coming, his Stalkers wouldn't really be able to... harass that too much. But now that the Banshee is done, now the Stalkers do what they do best. Getting on those front lines. And it is going to work out well-timed for the push. Or, well, for the move-out. The move-outs might not be committed to, but it is usually that time for the Terran to try something. 3rd CC being lifted on over. Going to be able to land up. 3 CC versus 3 Nexus. Additional gas is coming down for Classic. At least 1 more as he does finally add on the Robotics Bay. But he emphasized minerals first. And Zealot production is now getting kicked into gear. Is it going to be enough, though? Did he actually add too much prior to defending the first push? Byun's army rather intimidating and just bulldozing right over these Stalkers. Tank's going to get into that really beautiful location as well. And I think they do hit that shield battery. Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. Plus that one on the front's going to go down anyway. Fortunately, there is a backup. But that for very long. That is depowered. 1 pylon, not enough. Byun is hitting at that right time. Getting into this really brutal location. And Classic, I think was maybe... I mean, I don't want to say greedy, but I think he maybe chose the wrong time to try and start adding in technology and gas. Maybe should have emphasized the Zealots a little bit more, as it is going to be very close here. Widow Mines do pop off, and the tanks tank Zealot shots to give that time for the bio to actually come around and clear up every last Zealot. Ouch. So yeah, imagine if he could have fit in 1 more Zealot warp in somehow, if that was possible, had he not gotten the 4th gas, the Robotics Bay, and maybe, I don't know if he was saving resources for his Colossus. Maybe the extra Zealot warping could have happened, but this time around, Byun actually hitting when it was most appropriate, when that number was still kind of low. And then I think what was really sickening about this on the Protoss' side, just kind of going, ugh, I hate it, is that those tanks did get into that position. Like, it was actually just from the natural to the third, very little opposition, no time wasted actually sieging and unsieging tanks. And then they get into this position that every Protoss is like, ah, come on. GG's. Byun will clap back pretty much immediately. I guess alternatively, if there's also a way for this Colossus to come out faster, that might have helped too. But it basically, there wasn't enough of either one, right? There wasn't quite enough Zealots, but the Colossus wasn't quite out yet. So really good time for Byun to find the success that he did on top of all the micro that he did and focus fire that he did. It was definitely not anything like that last one, where it kind of felt like it was the opposite, where his attack happened at the exact wrong time. It missed its time to shine. That one was almost perfect. I can't count, guys, apparently. 1, 2. Now the series is all tied up 1-1. Bottom left it is Byun. Top right it is Classic. Kind of funny this way games went. Again, the timing of that bio push in the first game was a little bit too late. In the second game, it was just early enough, and that's simplifying things, but you could simplify it to that. Then you also had the opening start off poorly for the eventual winner in both games. It looked like Classic's Blink was a disaster. He ended up recovering, and Byun's Reaper Hellion squad didn't do, well, as much, I suppose, as it should have. Definitely not nearly as disastrous as those Stalkers were. And then the Banshees did help to make up, I would say, a little bit, too. They did pretty much exactly what you would hope 2 Banshees with Cloak would do. Any less than, what was it, eventually 12 probes? Or it was 10 in total. It was 8 and 2, I think. And you're like, I don't like the Banshees, what they did. But anyway, we got ourselves a little bit of a trick coming out from Byun. He is going to hide his first barracks while factory expanding. Classic, as I had mentioned in the first game, changing up his probe scouting patterns. So literally not probe scouting in this game. Unless he plans on Cybernetics Core scouting, which kind of guarantees that the probe would die. But it, you know, at least you would see what you're up against, I guess. Or you think you would. But that's not always the case. This probe actually goes across the map. It's going to see no barracks. And then the Reaper might just show up on the front door. As he's like, wait a second. Yeah, just no probe scout whatsoever. Nexus comes down. Byun with a little bit of a mind game that is now nothing. I mean, this is a weird benefit of not scouting. It's that you don't get tricked by fake strategies. So this could have been faked as an actual proxy, and then maybe you also scare them into thinking there could be even more dedicated to this one base play, because they just can't find everything with a single probe scout. Well, now it's just like, you know, for all intents and purposes, Classic, like the normal game. I don't understand. And it pretty much is. Reaper's going to arrive maybe a couple of seconds faster with its positioning, but I'm not even sure that's true. Well, no, that has to be true, because the barracks would be up here. So yeah, okay, it's a couple extra seconds faster, but really not important. Byun is going to go for the 2 Reapers. Let's see if he goes for a third. Yes, he does. He got that queued up, so he's going to go 3 Reaper, 2 Hellion. I guess he still ended up liking what it did in the last game, and as far as strictly was it worth it, was it not, I suppose you could argue that, or just look at the data. If you really want to be technical about it, I believe the resource loss was worse, because there's more gas involved in the Reaper losses than probe losses. But there's always those other factors that can make it seem worth it, and if one of those factors is, well, what if he doesn't have a shield battery in his natural? There wasn't a shield battery in the natural, so this could have actually worked. Unfortunately, it looks like that the Hellion went down. Oh god, I missed it. Nice. The Adept gets a snipe, manages to shade back as well. Now with only 1 Hellion, it is 3 shot on the probes. With 2, it's 2 shot. That's a big difference, and this was the game in which there was no shield battery, so if Byun had been allowed to simply race across the map like he had planned, he might have been able to actually hit before the wall was up. At least this building was up, or maybe the wall doesn't matter, actually. This is still a little spicy. That Adept was injured earlier on, although it traded itself out for the Hellion. Did go down. Second Hellion falls. Reaper finally falls, but 7 probes fell in this defense. Wow. Yeah, there wasn't a shield battery, so I was, like, already on Byun's side here. Like, oh, what if this could go better? But I didn't think it would ever go this good. Holy shit. That's going to be 10 probes? No, I didn't quite get the click on that one probe, but 9 probes for that. I mean, I was already kind of like, well, 4 is pretty, you know, I guess that's okay. More than double that for the same exact units? What a difference, and what a start for Byun as well. He should feel very happy with that. He's going to go into a very similar follow-up with Banshees on the way. This time I am paying attention. And Classic, well, he had already chosen his strategy, I believe, 2 Gateway Nexus, so there's not much else that he can really do. It just really sucks, because that was a dramatic loss of economy. And it might have been... it's not even worth saying, because it's just so early on. Yeah, never mind. I was like, well, if there's a 3rd Nexus actually on the way, then it could be recoverable. But obviously, that was so early. There's no way a 3rd Nexus would have been down. So he's just pumping out 2 probes at a time to try and replace it. That's so much money. He has no counterattack opportunity, something that Byun was, I guess, not quite able to fully predict. But I think with the robo timing and the other scouting that he did... number of units as well. Yeah, I think he would know that he's not really in a lot of danger, I suppose, but you do want to take this seriously. And there's nothing else to do as a Terran at this point in time, honestly. Like, there's no reason not to have your tank sieged up to defend against some harassment. Unfortunately, while that tank was initially set up well, it did lose its range. The Stalker is able to get into that back of the mineral line, and a lot of them will go down. In fact, all but 1 will fall. 9 SCVs did go down, but okay, yeah, all right. Okay, all right. I was like, well, yeah, a little tit for tat, but not actually, because the Banshee also showed up, I think, is what caused the tap out. Yeah, the Banshee showed up. As the one Stalker gets recalled, they're like, I got this, buddies. The Observer was not in place, and he is already in such a bad position that he does just tap out. That makes sense. That makes sense. This was a disaster of a game. I think you tap out for your mentality more than anything else. You're just like, nah, never mind. Never mind. All right, GG. Byun leads 2-1. Now leading the series on Oceanborn, we have top left Byun. And on the bottom right, it is Classic. Both of them going to be playing in the EWC in just a week's time here. Not against each other, but Byun is playing in Group A, Classic in Group B. Classic facing Clem, first and foremost. Byun, even you could say unlikely to face a Protoss. You could say that. He will probably dodge Estrella, and maybe if he loses, which kind of the guesswork is that Maru will advance or Dark. And then Byun will face Maru in the second round if he beats Oliveira, and that's an if. That is an if. That he will, you know, I guess what I'm saying is that Byun will eventually fall down to the elimination bracket. I don't think he's in enough of a good place to beat Maru or Dark to actually advance the top 4. He might get second. There is a chance he gets second, and it's a second for a second place match, and that's just, I have no idea how to predict that. But my point stands. I think I'm mostly right about this. It's actually very possible that Byun entirely avoids TvP. Because I think if he does end up doing as well as people hope that he does, then I think you have to have TVZ. He either faces Dark, Cyril, or Raynor. Or maybe even a Shin. But, yeah. It just seems that with his bracket, TVT is what he needs to be excelling at. And for Classic, he's got a little bit more of a diversity problem in the races that he has to potentially face in his bracket. Could be very different depending on the day and the form of his contestants. But first, he has to face Clem, and then he can worry about whether or not he actually gets to face Hero in a PvP or Cyril in a PvZ or whatever else it is. So we're really keeping a keen eye on Classic's play more than Byun, just as I also kind of prepare for that first match and how Classic is performing and what his weaknesses are in this matchup. That said, even if we see whatever we see in this best of 5 with Classic, he is very good at preparation. This is every pro gamer that I've talked to has said the same thing. He's generally not favored against Clem. Their history also says that as well. But because he is so good at preparation, that actually could change. Which, clearly you don't really have any preparation when it comes to these tournaments. Just a couple of minutes before the finals start, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm facing Byun. He is going to start really mixing things up, though. Classic I would actually say nowadays you would call him like a 70 or 80% macro player. But his fame comes a lot from those like 20 to 30% of times where he does something really wacky. Either really wacky or just kind of normal, cheesy, aggressive, but still cheesy and aggressive. So I think he and I was guilty of this as well, which is why I'm saying it, where it's like, this guy's cheesy, this guy will always do something like this, and it's not actually true. But he is fully capable of doing something like this, which is the proxy gateway with 3 gateways total, delaying that technology in favor of the earlier army harassment. So that's it's certainly something Classic can bring out, and he's deciding to do it here on his last life, try and mix things up, try and get into Byun's face, as opposed to what has been happening, which has been a couple of Reaper Hellion openers, a couple of Cyclone openers. Now, if this was a Cyclone opener, I feel like... Well, I'm actually not sure. I was gonna, initially I was like, well, Cyclones would be better against these gateway units, but that's not necessarily true. Only Cyclones would potentially struggle against the growing number of Stalkers, because they are glass cannons. But Cyclones plus a bunker, Cyclones plus a couple of Wood Mines, Cyclones plus, well, basically the bunker and a couple of Marines. I think it actually would do well. But really, the whole thing is the bunker here. It's a good thing that Byun has defaulted to a bunker every single game, because if he didn't, he would be dead as a doornail. He might still be dead. He has lifted all 4 of his Wood Mines to go for the attack, leaving his army, whatever was left over, back at home, and it's already gotten killed. 1 Cyclone goes down. 2nd Cyclone on the high ground is a lot more effective, but that supply depot doesn't get raised. I don't know if Byun thought that he was baiting the army, but I'm not sure that's actually how that works. Well, the Cyclone lives. It doesn't matter. Okay, doesn't matter so much, I think. Cyclone lives, but 7 SCVs did go down. Meanwhile, Wood Mine's going to try and pop off, very close to losing a catastrophic number of probes, but the pull is good. Only 2 will go down. Wood Mines will be cleaned up. Medivac is like 2 shot away from death, but 1 shot, I think, with 4 Stalkers. So that's not going to appear again anytime soon. And this game is certainly an interesting start. Byun does not die to the surprise proxy gate. He had no idea. But he did take damage. But Classic did also give away a decent amount of units to do that. And he delayed his technology. And you can see in the resources lost, Byun is winning, but he did just lose the medivac. Let me check again in a second once these Wood Mines pop off. Yeah, okay, they don't pop off. All right, so now that everything has died, it is still technically favorable to Byun. He's also got some pressure on the front, trying to take advantage. Oh, and the Libra. Oh, my goodness, there's units popping out of nowhere. Okay. Cyclones could have gone for that pile, and initially that's what they were going for. Liberator did manage to take out a Stalker before it also went down. Kind of a funny attack, honestly, from Byun, because I feel like there is a high chance that it just completely failed. In this case, it's meh. The Liberator died, but kind of traded out, and then the Cyclones apparently are going to live. No, they aren't. Just kidding. Yep, the proxy gateway's still there. I could have seen that coming. Whoops. Yeah, and there's no reason not to. There is just nothing else that Byun has right now that is scary for Stalkers out in the map. So while the Stalkers don't have Blink, and that's going to make them more vulnerable, the Terran doesn't have any other options either. So it's kind of all fair. And with the Liberator killed and the Medivac drop killed, if Byun continues to have harassment units out and about, it's a question, honestly, of how much that is worth it for the Terran at this point, I would say. It's like, how much did you invest into these harassing units that aren't necessarily supporting you as the game goes on? This is a cloakless Banshee, so pretty low commitment. And as far as making sure that the army is kept back and a little scared of some harassment, or if it does actually get some probes, more power to Byun, honestly. But there's been a lot of harassing units that have gone down at this point. And just the creation of such units does delay the bigger, badder bio ball. Or the medivacs, or whatever it is. In this case, I think they delay the medivacs. Stalker does get traded out. Actually, not even traded. The Banshee survived. Just kidding. Without that Blink, Classic is losing a decent amount of Stalkers. And you know what? He still doesn't have Blink. I keep on expecting to see it just because that's the way it goes. But there was no Twilight Council built until very recently, I believe. It was Robo Robotics Bay kind of as quickly as you could get it. A Twilight Council is around, though, and I guess he just decided I need to deal with this attack first, so I'll get to that later. Probably a good call. He catches Byun without Medivacs, and the tanks were not sieged. An extremely dangerous decision, however, from Classic, I gotta say, because Byun was clearly just not paying attention at that exact moment. And if there was anything different, if Byun was paying attention, if one tank was sieged on that low ground, if there was a bit more of an arc of the bio, etc., if combat shields was 5 seconds away from finishing instead of 25, like that actually could have gone, I think, quite poorly for Classic, but he chose the right moment to push out, shut down the attack, and now Byun has kind of lost a little bit of that momentum. I don't know if momentum is the right word, but he's supposed to kind of be the one who moves out, gets a little bit of that map control, kind of spooks Classic a little bit. And now it is the complete opposite, as he also picks up a Medivacs at the exact wrong time. Classic more than happy to see that. It does get fully unloaded, and there's a decent number of Marauders, but they are all injured. If all of these were healthy, I think a Concave would do wonderful against this. There's no Warp Prism to support either, no Charge Lots to tank, but it was about the heals necessary. Byun choosing some risky strategies right now. He will lift up once again, going for his original plan that was revealed. But I suppose this would be where a lot of other Terrans would have just stayed back at home and said, okay, I'm going to be really safe and take my 3rd CC whenever I can. But Byun would be the type of guy that said, nah, I'm going to continue with this. Like, I want this pressure. I want some map control. I want some threat to my opponent. And if I get a little lucky, maybe Classic thinks I am turtling and then just literally has his army staying around over there for no reason. Fortunately, Classic either realizes what Byun would be more likely to do because these guys face each other all the time, or just realized like he wasn't going to break the natural. He had no War Prism, he had no Charge Lots. Breaking that natural was going to be extremely difficult no matter what was there. So he's like, well, why not just pull back home? So he did, and that means that only the Nexus was canceled. I think that could have done a lot more if he, again, was completely out of position, forced a recall to respond. And a canceled Nexus is certainly fine, especially because I think it was quite early on into its creation. 4th CC is now on the way for Byun. Ghost as well. He's gotten up to 6 Vikings, which for the 3 count of Colossus is a little low. Generally talking about more like 10, I guess, on average for that number of Colossus. But he is also in need of Medivacs, so not only did he lose one, but then I also mentioned that I think the direct consequence of his early game harassment, I think, was a starport that did not produce Medivacs particularly quickly. So we're not starting at a very high count. You do have that struggle of dealing with a Colossus, so Vikings can be that necessity. And then it also is just expensive, so you might have to skip a couple of Marauder or Marine cycles to produce that before your 3rd CC is completely saturated. It's a little hiccupy, basically. If you play Terran and you've been in this position, you know it kind of feels off. And for right now, it also just probably isn't feeling like the best game for Byun. Not because he's in a bad supply or a bad economy. Like, this is a totally normal position for Terran to be in. But he is not scared Classic in a very long time. And so Classic does get even better foundations set up. So 80 probes on 4 bases, lots of pylons coming down for spotters, observers all around the map, War Prism getting set up for the run-by, pylons also could be set up for run-bys, already Zealots set up for this 4th base, potentially finding it before it's a planetary. Like, you just, in terms of comfort and who takes advantage of that comfort, I suppose, like, I think right now it is the Protoss. And Classic is really trying to take advantage of the comfort of this kind of more turtle Terran by not just adding on the things I listed off, but also going for double Stargate already. So that's going to be triple Stargate, actually. He already had one to begin with. Fleet Beacon's going to finish. +1 air weapons is on the way, alongside 2-1 for his ground. And he is going to be producing carriers. Now, this would, in the past, or against a different player, maybe kind of a surprise. But Classic is the one pushing more of this narrative, and the scan is absolutely perfect. Good job, Byun there, who is also continuing to clear things up. He's got his 4th base as a planetary. He found the Zealot run-by. He found a couple of those pylons. He's finding further run-by attempts. So he is cleaning up his side of the map so it looks a little less one-sided. His own center tower is obviously providing him the map vision he would like. A 3rd one probably going to go down to the planetary at some point. But with the scan, he knows what he's up against. He still had those 6 Vikings from earlier on because there's been no battles since then. And so he will continue adding 3 Vikings at a time, eventually up to 6 with 3 starports. I imagine he will get reactors on all of them. A little supply blocked, though. Oh, it's a daisy. He is also nearly maxed. So now you got to really look at your composition and say, is this the exact number of units that I want? A good sight on that observer. Actually, a big difference as far as the Protoss vision and feeling of control over the map than just 60 seconds ago. So as much as this looks like it's like a janitorial duties or something like that, it's kind of important, I think. Classic isn't vulnerable while he transitions with the way the game has gone and how much static defense he has and just how clearly Byun was not ready to push. But he wasn't particularly strong either, you know? Like, he's not going to have the army he's going to have eventually, which is going to be more carriers and more Storm, more Templars, blah, 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 blah. And so the one thing he could have done was hope that Byun was just literally turtling. Either because he was scared for whatever reason, or because, well, he got a little lazy. And Byun was not either one of those things. But now, after that is done, we finally might have a really big engagement, not just these couple of pylons being picked off. Warp Prism is set up to go for the good old 1-2 punch, but there are a couple of missile turrets. No upgrades on them yet. I mean, the Warp Prism 100% is going to get through. Eventually, the Warp Prism will get speed. The missile turrets will get high staccato tracking. Warp Prism will probably always be able to deposit the Zealots, but they won't be able to get a second reinforcement. And that's pretty much what you're looking for as a Terran. You can't ask for much more. 3-3 on the way for Byun, +2 ship weapons as well as +1 armor in general. Affects both ground and air. Not that he has any tanks or Wood-of-Mines anymore. A couple of Wood-of-Mines. Hey, you're going to benefit from that, all right? And now here comes the actual battle. Classic's ready to go. He's got all of his upgrades finished, at least that +1. He is waiting on a few more, so there's no particular timing, but he is maxed out, and he's going to look for a little bit of the control. Missile turrets being placed in outward positions as Byun starts to try and take his 5th. Looks like that will actually happen. Protoss army's way over to the right side. Vikings find a free opportunity. 1 dead carrier for nothing in return. Feels good, man. I'm actually a little surprised that Sunstar never went up. It's coming up now, but it's a little late. Classic is pushing his army off to that right side, but he also has a proxy gate off to the left. Should he lose a battle, hopefully not too one-sided, but if he loses supply in a battle, he might actually choose to go for more run-bys to buy time, depending on how bad of a battle it was. Right now, he's just maxed out, so that's not actually the threat. But of course, the Terran would never be able to know that. You know, as much as this would be an ideal time to have Marines stab the back of this base, 1, you're really scared of this army, and you really got to pay attention to the fight. And 2, you don't know if they actually are maxed out. They could just warp in and defend it. That's a pretty good storm to start things off. Mothership Cloak as well. We got 2-2 versus 3-1-1. 2-1 in the sky for Classic. 2-1 in the sky for Terran. Mothership's going to get taken down. Viking number still holding strong at 15. Storm's actually landing on the front of the bio. Not actually getting too much, and actually, I think that's all the High Templars. They were EMP'd, man. Vikings going to take down 1 more carrier, 1 more Colossus. Still a lot of them in the sky, even as they're being chased. 8 still available. And that's a little low, I suppose. But I think it's okay. He's got 6 more on the way. And Defender's Advantage is kicking in. So he is going to have 14 Vikings on the front lines, lickety-split. But as Classic loses his air, he's not replacing it. And we are actually getting closer to being over-Vikinged, whatever you want to put it, than anything else. The planetary will go down, 23 SCVs will go down, but the actual fight will go to Byun. Some of Classic's army was distracted. Plenty of Zealots still chopping up SCVs. But Classic also just a little overstaying his welcome, because, I mean, as much as it was nice to trickle in that warp gate compared to the air, at the end of the day, you know, Bio with 3-3 having finished is pretty good against those gateway units. Particularly when Zealots aren't there to buy shots or buy time. So Byun gets that opportunity to collapse on the army, but overall, he's still in a very poor position. That 5th base not actually mining. That 4th base was killed. SCVs going down still. So we have that counter still racking up here. And Classic is just so freaking happy back at home. 6 bases, 83 probes, continuing his upgrades. He's got that option of going either into carriers or into warp gate units, and both are Byun is struggling against. Keeping the right balance of your composition as the Terran is difficult. Vikings actually landed to help out, but they are super vulnerable to Storm. Not because they die instantly, just because they're very immobile. Zealots are tearing up the natural as Byun chases down the remnants of the army, and Classic just knows how much he's in control. He's got 13 gateways, 3 stargates. You're not going to instantly remax, but he has no problem filling up the supply he loses whenever he does these zealot run-bys, whenever he does the pokes with his main army. Byun knows that he's in a lot of trouble. Medivacs have yet to go up and heal this army. I think they've reinforced to the right side rather than the left, and we do need that to be healed up. And if it's healed, Byun does have an almost even army supply with some good upgrades. Classic is perfecting his upgrades, though, and he always gets that +3 shield as well as armor. But, you know, I'm not going to blame the upgrades here. It's just overall, Byun being in a very defensive position did not hold on to the turtle. His defenses did get cracked. It's a very big difference when this is a planetary, and then there's maybe even a couple of liberators, especially as the carrier number does get shot down. Even if it doesn't, if you have a liberator or two plus all the missile turrets that Byun had at one point before he got broken, it's a bit more of a struggle for the Protoss just to clean sweep a base. But now they're orbitals, and there's no missile turrets, and the Sense Tower also died. So this is just so easy for Classic to kill if Byun is out of position. Classic not gonna go for just the multi-pronged attacks, left, right, and center, although I really think that would work, because again, orbitals, not planetaries. But he has built up his mighty army, including the air, so it's gonna want to clump up together a little bit more. Still can have some zealot run-bys, and they're always going to be so bothersome. Even if they only kill 2 SCVs, it's going to distract Byun. EMP trying to take out the storms, unsuccessful in all of them so far. Good control from Classic as well. 9 Vikings in the sky, a couple more being made. Byun had to just sacrifice so many, having to land them to help out. I think he did lift and repair some of them to his credit, but he still needs more. With the amount of air units that Classic was building, something that Byun would never be sure of. He doesn't know exactly what his opponent is doing. Not quite the same power of a tech swap from a Zerg player, but kind of similar idea. I actually feel like Liberators were at least... Oh my god, those were good storms. Oh, from all over the place. Oh, the back attack storms. Oh, and there's one more there in the pocket. Oh, now there's actually, I think there's no more, so maybe you do have to skedaddle without storms. This is just not the best army, but it's not the worst. I think it could trade. And it also has really good upgrades. Give it a couple more seconds, it's going to have the best upgrades possible. Classic also reinforcing almost instantly. Still has that run-bys going around. Storms once again coming into play as he pulls some of those defensive storms forward, the backup storms. This is still going to be a very poor-looking fight for Classic. But his economy, man, the amount of zealots he can reinforce with, it's just crazy. The Byun would have needed such an ideal engagement that he was able to steamroll all of the reinforcements beyond that. But he scans ahead and he actually doesn't see anything. He just kind of figures that there must be something building somewhere. If he really thought there was 0 army, he would have continued. But no, that definitely was not the case. GG's. Classic will not drop here, and we are going to go to Game 5. It's the final match. Going to be on Site Delta, top left, Shopify Rebellion's Byun. And on the bottom right, it is Classic. Could you all not tell me that cat cam was not properly aligned? Can't believe you guys. How could you live knowing or not knowing that Byun's tech number was 0? Can't believe you guys accepted this poor quality broadcast. I'm actually not sure what that number is supposed to be. I guess it's the amount of resources invested into upgrades? Maybe? Or maybe it's like if we see a 7X score go down, is it rise? I don't know. There's actually a lot of numbers on these overlays that we just simply do not pay attention to. Byun has, for the most part, been factory expanding, but I think last game he did change it up. This game he is 1-Rax expanding. Classic started last game off with a mediocre proxy gate, all in all. I think it was a little bit of a wash between the two. Technically, it was worse for Classic, so yeah. Yeah, not the greatest start, but I think really had a moment with the Colossus. That was a brilliant move out that, as I had pointed out, was incredibly risky. But when that worked, it really snowballed the potential of Colossus, which really makes the Terran quite afraid. So Byun should be afraid. He, had to lift his 3rd CC. He had to go back to his natural. But then it kind of, I think, put him into a position of, well, I really can't do very much at all. Because even as my drop got on the map, it was deflected pretty quickly. It felt like a game that it at the right moment took the wind out of the sails of Byun at the exact right moment. So at a couple of the earlier games, there was the right moment to attack and win, which is great. But that was just in a right moment to attack and not win, but kind of push that Terran's ideal game into the back of their mind. Now they're more worried about the Colossus, and they're more worried about what you're doing, especially when a lot of the meta of this matchup has been Colossus into mass gateway units. So lots of harassment coming in from different locations. Big opportunity to overwhelm the Terran as they're battling to get their 3rd CC up. And instead of that, we know that it was Classic adding on tons of gases and going into Stargates, but then that also brings up the challenge, where Byun is like, oh, okay, he's not going to overwhelm me, so let's see what he's doing. Oh, he's Stargating? Well, I can't push into that, so I guess this is my life now, late game TvP, which I did not end up winning. Classic might be the better of the two when it comes to the late game in that type of position, which I think did become more ideal for Classic as the game went on. Stargate's going to be the play first and foremost this game. This has not been done in the best of 5. It's on Twilight Council or Robo. Now we're going to get into Phoenix, most likely Colossus. I've seen a little bit of a return of Phoenix Charge in a couple of games, a couple of Protoss players, but not really. And for Byun, well, he has decided to go for full-on macro, 3cc, 1-Rax, 3rd CC, and then barracks behind that. That lacking factory makes your very early game vulnerable. So right around now to about 5 minutes, you don't have high-tech heavy punchers that can help defend against, for instance, a proxy gate. But Classic threw out his proxy gate once and will not do it again. He is Phoenix opening against a 3cc 3-Rax, and my understanding is that this don't feel so good for the Protoss. Because basically their only option whenever they do discover that it is 3cc, which is not known right now, is to say, oh, shucks, and then just macro as normal. There's not really anything they can do about it. They can't macro better because they've already chosen their build, and they can't attack because these units don't really do well attacking. And even if this ended up being a 4-gate instead, we actually know that the 4-gate has a very limited potential to kill a 3cc 3-Rax. So honestly, the more I explain this, the more that it makes it sound like a 3cc 3-Rax is actually just an amazing build, but it absolutely has vulnerabilities, and I just don't think we see that happen as often, because you kind of have to have the right coincidental match that you're watching. You have to find the match in which someone does 3cc 3-Rax, and then you have to find the Protoss player who actually like proxy gates against it, or 4 gates well enough to kill it, or I guess it's kind of the things I can think of in the early game that would kill it. But it's not only the early game where it can have a couple of weaknesses. The 3cc 3-Rax is very powerful for the amount of economy and the amount of Marauders that you get, basically. I know Marines are coming out too, but Marauder count good. Starport. Starport is kind of its weakness in that you do not have a high number of medevacs. And if you have to go into Vikings, you never have a high number of medevacs. And you might not have enough Vikings either. So that is the balance that the Terran player has to strive for. And it's also the point at which the Protoss player really wants to abuse them. So again, Classic sees a 3rd CC finally doing a run-by with his Phoenix that killed a couple of SEVs. And it's like, oh, cool. what else is there to do about it? But in all actuality, like, what he could do about it is try and take advantage of the limited number of air units. So your ground army is vulnerable as Classic. You do not want to be concaved by the bio, even if it is a little injured. But at some point, the lack of starport units does come to roost. Like, it becomes a problem. At least that's what I've been seeing. And I think the Protoss gets put into a little bit of a pickle as far as handling this. You see 3CC versus 3 Nexus with Classic only up by 6 workers, and they're like, this is why it doesn't feel as great. But since he is going into a kind of high technology style of play, he's not going mass charge lot, then I think the lack of probe difference is a little less concerning. No doubt about it, Byun has gotten his build. Nothing harmed it, really. 4 SCVs, 5 SCVs, and a Reaper is marginal. And now he's almost ready to go. He should figure that this is Phoenix Colossus. Technically, he doesn't know for sure. No, he does. He saw a Robo. Okay, so yeah, he knows it's Phoenix Colossus. 1 Phoenix does go down, try to go after a medevac. Oh, 2 Phoenix went down trying to go over a medevac. Oh, that is not worth it. I mean, 1 Phoenix for a medevac I think already isn't. Oh my god, he lost another one. Oh, no. 3 Phoenix killed, only 3 left over. Now, a Marauder is going to get killed. That took forever. But that's ugly. Oh, that's so ugly. Well, let's see if he can recover from this. A few less Phoenix, a few less Marauder lifts, a few less double shots on the medevac to actually tear them down. And far less harassment potential, too. Oh, and also far less defense as far as the air defense goes. Yep, that's also one reason you want Phoenix. Yep, okay. Yep, that makes sense. Beyond picking up 4 medevacs, hoping to find those Phoenix out of position. Or counting on their numbers and not be high enough to stop them anyway. Scan on the 3rd base reveals the army is waiting there, so he knows the natural is kind of open. But it is only kind of open. The army's really not that far away. This ends up being more awkward than anything else, honestly. I think if the army was at the 4th base, I think maybe you go for it. But the Phoenix were even mostly controlled well. 1 more did go down. 2 more looking to die, too. But they're threatening in case the medevacs pick up. They're there, and they will help kill that medevac. Oh, come on. Jesus, stop making me look stupid. All right, well, fine. If there were more Phoenix, that would have 100% died. Still, as awkward as that was for Classic, who was really supposed to have more anti-air, it also really ended up looking mostly awkward for Byun. He kind of did something that looked like it was going to be really cool. It definitely wasn't as cool as he thought it would be, and then leaving was really awkward. It's like you wanted to leave a party, but people kept distracting you, and you're like, I don't like it here. Let me leave. Classic gets up to 4 bases during all that hubbub that was chasing that weird, awkward exit. 77 probes to 76 SCVs. Command center on location as well. Byun really getting a lot of macro in this game. Although the Zealots around could have dived to the actual kill. Obviously, it would have just been canceled. So definitely not worth sacrificing the Zealots there. Oh, Adepts. I don't even know when they were made. Are coming in for some harassment. SCVs are going down, but the command center finishes. Planetary will be up soon, and this is a very, very strong defensive point for the Terran. We are at 6 medevacs. And while that's totally adequate, and 7 and 8 are also on the way, it is still notable for, a 10-minute game. That's not the highest it could be. It's also not the lowest, because I really do think that the Phoenix were supposed to kill maybe more like 2 or 3 medevacs. They only killed 1. Double Stargate on the way. Classic loves this as a finisher. They're also taking the bottom left base, which, frankly, Byun might just forget to scout. I would actually not be surprised by that. We'll see. Byun right now is focusing on getting maxed out. He's got Ghost, Bio, Viking, 4 bases, 81 workers, mirroring Classic's 81 workers as well. Scan on the main army, actually, is going to reveal nothing important. Scan on the main is that great one, like last game, where it sees that, yes, there is a carrier on the way. Not that I want it to change as a... I mean, I guess I'm Protoss Terran, but I guess I'm more Terran than anything else. I do actually wonder why the Stargate has to reveal what's being built. It does seem kind of like just an annoyance for the Protoss. But you guys have lived with it for 14 years, so I guess deal with it. Anyway, Byun would figure out that it's Stargate's play anyway, just because it is classic. There was an upgrade researching. You didn't actually see the Fleet again, but it was classic, so he would have known no matter what. War Prism gets found, weirdly enough, but does live, come back later. Zealots just run past the planetary. And this is going to get officially just blocked. I would not mind a literal wall versus Protoss in this scenario at all. No, I think he should actually make it a wall. Okay, he will. Engineering Bay is pretty healthy as far as a wall goes, but didn't want to spend the extra minerals, I suppose. 5th base is done. Mothership is on the way. All types of late game TvP as, oh wow, that's a lot of additional command centers. Byun was like, last game I didn't have enough command centers. That was my problem. I don't know if that was particularly his problem, but it could have been one of the problems, I suppose. Stargate reveals what's being built to terrify the opponent. Maybe. I do see carriers being produced in TvP and just a very heavy sigh. Not because I think it's broken or imbalanced. It's just, it is frustrating to deal with. There is a balancing act for the Terran when it comes to facing this late game Protoss. Yeah, again, Viking versus Medevac counts pretty big. One of the biggest balancing acts, I guess, you have to make. But then honestly, even when it comes down to some of the bio and the composition there, how many Marines versus Marauders, how many Ghosts, can also be a bit of a trick to it. Big Terran army heading down the left side. Byun hoping that his planetary will help hold back at home, or that Classic won't have the chutzpah to actually push the issue. Classic Duth. He does have the chutzpah. Storm is the Ghost, which fortunately can take a little bit of a beating there. EMPs are being slapped down. I think all Storms are now gone. All Phoenix basically dead as well. Vikings not shift queued. They should be in this next battle. Planetary is soaking up some damage, but also taking a lot of money from the repair. Byun not short on cash, however, just focusing purely on the engagement, trying to take the best one possible with not all of his army. Don't forget, the army over here did kill the Nexus, looking for a second one as well, but notably missing from the front lines. It turns out Byun did read this correctly. He was able to defend with the help of the Planetary as well as continue with the attack. But oh, that wasn't a recall back home. That was a recall on a Mothership over to the Planetary. Big surprise. SCV Zuke pulled in for the repair, but it's not going to be good enough. That did take a little while to kill, but still fast enough that Classic gets to then Nexus recall back to save his 3rd base. That was pretty nice movements right there from the Protoss player, but at the end of the day, Byun does have 5 bases to Classic's 3. 4th base has finished. That was originally going to be the 5th, so there's some consolation prize. And while 25 probes did go down, he was at such a high number anyway that as he's been forced back to 4 bases, this is kind of a totally fine probe count. He's still fully saturating all the bases. Upgrades finishing up for both parties. 3-3 will be finalized for Byun. Classic on 3-1. That one is shields. So it's going to help his Archons a lot, and it will help his air army as well. He also has 1-1 on the air army. About to be +2 on the carriers. He's going to want that. Because ship weapons is going to be done for Byun. And 3-3. Byun immediately starting up some of the building upgrades too. Planetaries have saved his butts. Missile turrets are actually very annoying for Protoss to push into, so making them even better is good. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce. Is it chutzpah or chutzpah? Can you say the chut more often? Anyways. It's Yiddish, isn't it? Someone's gonna have to teach me Yiddish. +3 ship weapons on the way alongside +2 armor. Byun trying to match the air army of his opponents. Applying some pressure. Doesn't find much more here. Decides to back away. Classic's 4th base happily mining. Does give enough resources. With his maxed out army, there is not as many direct battles in the last couple of minutes. But he is also able to afford a 5th. And that is very important as he tries to take some map control here, tries to pressure the Terran. He does want that in his back pocket if he has to go back and rely on his economy. First storm is pretty good, but I believe that is all the storms gone. Archon's merging currently. Lots of the Protoss army very injured, but where the hell is the Terran army? Looking very small on the ground. 3 tanks are actually anchoring this defense. Just need to pull back a little bit more. And the Viking number in the sky is absolutely insane. 21 Vikings with 2-1. I would say that's an appropriate number, though, because Classic did go up to 8 carriers in a mothership. So I don't know what the actual math is, if there is a, 4 Vikings to a carrier. That probably isn't it. But I would say 22 Vikings should kill 8 carriers. We also got to worry about Storms and Archons, but that's what the EMPs are for. The tanks still providing some good defensive setup, too. Now, when it comes to attacking, those tanks aren't going to look nearly as useful, but right now, in the positions they are with the SimCity helping out, it's great. The carrier is also being kind of isolated into an air versus air battle, are losing it currently. Another carrier just got sniped, and the Vikings have only been injured, not killed. Yeah, 2 carriers have gone down. Liberators do get to make an appearance in this game. I was thinking last game that they would be helpful. They are not simply helpful as they are when there's no carriers in a PvT game, but I think they are still helpful. It does complicate the engagements. It does clearly still help out in defensive chokes and around planetaries, against run-bys or against an attempted push. Because if the carriers have to take care of the Liberator first, they shift queue in the Liberators, for instance, well, that's probably while they're being shift queued by the Vikings. So then it's like, was that worth it? Are your storms properly covering? Are the Liberators the end-all, be-all of their defense? Usually not. There's those tanks, there's those planetaries. But bam! Man, finding him out of position, finding me not paying attention. This mothership recall, an excellent maneuver from Classic, is just finding those slightly weaker spots for Byun's defenses. And that was weaker. Planetary and I believe an extra orbital went down. Vikings now trying to do what they do best, kill that mothership, get on top of those carriers. Air Army is way lower than it was before, but Classic doing what he did in the last game, reinforcing a lot with the ground army. They are going to reinforce the fastest, and they're still going to be kind of useful. If they can't take a direct fight because the Terran army is still good enough, then they're really good at trying to check around for those other bases. Right now they're not, but funnily enough, a Nexus attempt is going to find this command center. So maybe they are a bridge. Maybe if you do not want to remax entirely on gateway units, but the bridge is good. And then you can decide, as you did last game, whether you want to go into carriers again. As I said, this attempted Nexus finds this base. It is an orbital, which means it can lift. There's actually kind of an upside to this. If it was trying to be a planetary, it would have just died. Vikings get stormed and obliterated. Now that Viking count at a kind of measly 8. Now, this would take care of 2 carriers. That's not that much a problem, but Classic is going back into carriers as he realizes he has a moment here. He also takes a pretty good fight. Charge left on top of the bio. Storm actually hitting. Vikings not all focus firing. That carrier should have gone down way faster. To be fair, all the interceptors did. But now the ground army is the real problem. Byun has not been able to rebuild his army fast enough. He still has those tanks. So once again, not helping in this particular battle. And he wasn't able to abuse the defensive infrastructure as much as he wanted because that recall happened. He was supposed to have a planetary and an orbital providing more SimCity, more of a choke against an incoming attack. And that mothership just completely took it away. Without that mothership, that would have been extremely difficult to kill. Even if you were able to blind them, kill their sensor tower, and try and go right, left, right, left, right, left, just pushing through this choke is so hard. Classic's, he's a cool Protoss. He's a cool guy. He wears his sunglasses at night. Scan reveals that there is a Nexus being taken there, but can you really do anything about it? Byun knows that his supply currently is not so good. It'd be a different situation if Classic wasn't on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bases again, and then that's his 6th. And Byun did scout the 5th as well, so there's logically a 4th. He knows that he is up against a Protoss who had recovered from the base snipes earlier on. It's not nearly as much of a bank as it was in the last game, but it is good enough to outproduce Byun, and Byun is just down to his good old micro. That will not be enough against the carriers, against the storms, against the reinforcing stalkers. This Byun army is gone. It's just mostly Marines at this point. They're not going to do very much. Classic's late game, very good here. And I don't really know what I would advise Byun to do against it. I guess he just actually needs to be more on point about those mothership recalls. It sounds like I don't think late game PvT is going to devolve into mothership recall or loss. Like, I don't think it's the only way to do it, but if you are up against Classic, that might be the biggest power spike you have to worry about. If you are in this game and you've got your orbitals, you've got your production, you've got your own great army, then the one thing you would have to worry about is being severely out of position. Maybe that mothership run by is what you actually have to worry about the most, which is just not usually the case. But for Classic, it absolutely is. And that was good enough to win him the game and the series. GG's.